So good evening, everyone. Mary sent out an email today with an attachment of a letter I wrote. And some of you may already read it, and I'm going to read the letter tonight and make some comments as I go through it. The context of the letter is that people have asked me to kind of make some comment from a Kriya perspective in terms of all the craziness in our country and in the world. So that's what I've attempted to do, rooting it in the teachings of Yogananda and our spiritual gurus. But I'm going to start with a parable that Yogananda used to like to tell. And it captures part of the essence of what I've written, and also what our attitude needs to be. So, a very pious man would meditate day after day on the Ganges River, near the Ganges River, the holy river in India. And one day, after some very fervent meditating and praying, an angel appeared to him and said, "You have this wonderful karma, so that when you die, the choice is up to you whether you go to heaven or hell." He said, "Well, of course, I'll go to heaven." He said, "Well, wait a minute. If you go to heaven, you'll be in heaven with 10 fools. And if you go to hell, you'll be in hell with a profoundly wise man." He thought about it, and he said, "I think I'm going to choose to go to hell with the wise man." And the angel asked him why. He said, "Because if I spend heaven with 10 foolish men, eventually heaven's going to become a hell. And if I spend my hell with a very, very wise man, I will figure out how to create heaven in hell." All right? Now, let that story be the backdrop of what I'm going to read to you tonight in my comments. It's never ultimately about what's happening around us. I want to stress that. It's about what's happening within us. And if we don't get that, then we miss the spiritual life altogether. Okay? So I begin with a quote from Yogananda, and this quote is a living sermon. "This is not a political talk. My domain is spirituality. I shall always live and act within that realm, and in the domain of spirit I shall die. I speak only from that level of consciousness." Just imagine what life would be like if we spoke only from that level of consciousness. "As a youth in India, I used to mix with people of both political parties. God forbid, right? We can't do that anymore. But I joined neither. I appreciated their respective points of view, but I saw that I would be able to do more good by spiritual means, for only spiritual power can truly transform the world." End of quote. Yogananda saw the state of human affairs through a spiritual lens, whether those affairs were favorable or not. The word spiritual in this context should not be understood as something otherworldly or disconnected from human affairs. Everything that occurs within human history is a reflection of the consciousness guiding our attitudes and actions. Remember what we teach in yoga, what Yogananda taught and all the Kriya gurus taught and all the masters at some level teach. Everything begins with a thought, causal realm. Everything in the material creation, everything that anyone has ever created started out as a thought form. You imbue that thought with energy, that's the astral realm. And then you bring it into action, and then it takes form. That's how life on planet Earth is created. That's how our individual lives take shape and form. If our consciousness is driven by the forces of fear, prejudice, anger, greed, and the lust for power, we necessarily produce misery on planet Earth. Correspondingly, if our consciousness is imbued with truth, beauty, and goodness, all manifestations of God's love, we necessarily foster harmony, peace, and cooperation among people. Consciousness is everything. Everything in the material world is a manifestation of some level of consciousness. If we try to change the course of human history only by trying to change things on a material level, we won't succeed. Okay? Today's oppressed will become tomorrow's oppressors. That's how it works. The challenge for us right now is that we are living in a time of transition. The old order of consciousness is giving way to something new, but not without an intense fight. And the new order of God-inspired consciousness has yet to be fully manifested. So we're in this in-between stage. Thus, we are living in a time of extremes. The battle between light and darkness is at a fever pitch. History is moving in the right direction. Okay? Don't get caught up in emotions that tell you otherwise. This is the best time to be alive in human history. I've said this before. If I was teaching what I'm teaching now, we'll say in 16th century Spain, I would have been burned at the stake. History is moving forward. The old is passing away, and the new hasn't yet been born. And what we're going through are the birthing pains, but we are moving in the right direction. The challenge for those of us practicing Kriya Yoga, I want you to get this, it's very important, is that we are living out of a future consciousness. We are embodying what Jesus taught. Be in the world, but not of the world. We're operating from a different perspective, a transcendental perspective, characterized by the spirit of nonviolence, cooperation, and communal life grounded in love. By contrast, the majority of the world is shackled by a form of survival consciousness rooted in the illusion of separation from God and one another. This is why so many of us feel as if they do not belong to the present age. We don't. We're living a future consciousness now. We don't belong in that sense to this world. I'm not talking about escaping. Quite the opposite, as a matter of fact. But in terms of consciousness, most of us do not belong in this world and in this age. We have intuitions about the future age. We have intuitions about the golden age. We have intuitions about love being the dominant force on planet Earth. And the world hasn't caught up with us, but that makes it very difficult for us. And so we got to get over this notion that, we're going to be really comfortable in a permanent way with what's happening in the world. We won't be in our lifetime. There may be moments, but we're not going to be because we don't belong to this age. We belong to a future age. And I'll talk more about that in a little bit. This is why so many feel as if they do not belong to the present age, because they are living in a higher state of consciousness that is generally foreign to how the world operates. We should not, however, despair over this situation. What we are doing is creating an energetic blueprint for future generations. We are making a difference right now, but more profoundly, we are serving those who will come after us. In this context, I'm reminded of words spoken by Dr. Martin Luther King literally the night before he died. And this is kind of our words too, if we're really awake. God has allowed me to go up to the mountain. Haven't we all been up to the mountain? Haven't we caught glimpses of what life can be and what it's supposed to be? And I've looked over. And I think we can all relate to this. And I have seen the promised land. We know the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. And so I am happy tonight. It's okay to be happy. Be happy. Damn it. I'm having a good time. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. My eyes have seen the coming of the glory of the Lord. Can't we all relate to that to some extent? Because we're living a future reality here and now. Let me tell a story about Yogananda that captures this. A few years before he died, somebody gifted him the lake shrine. It's in California. It's one of his 3 holy sites, as I like to say. Some of you have been there. It is absolutely beautiful. And Yogananda worked his fingers to the bone to create what it has become. And then he died shortly after. He wasn't doing it for him. He was doing it for us. That's how we have to see our lives. We're making a difference now. Don't misunderstand me. But we're sowing seeds for the future that will come to pass. We are prophets ahead of our time. That's what we are. There's another insight that we need to remember during these difficult and challenging times. And some of you are not going to like it, but either it's true or it's not true. Let me say this. Spiritually mature people can hold not contradictory truth, but different truths together at one time. See, the world sees things in this dualistic way. It's good or it's bad. It's this or that. It can never be both. I'm telling you, it's both. Spiritually mature people learn to see both at the same time. Different truths at the same time. There's another insight that we need to remember during these challenging times. Specifically, every human being inhabiting planet Earth has chosen to be here. Their soul has sent them here now because this is serving their highest evolution. There's no such thing as bad karma. There's uncomfortable karma and there's pleasant karma. But uncomfortable karma is good karma too because it's leading us where we need to go. Every human being on this planet has chosen to be here. That is a truth that Yogananda taught, all the Kriya Gurus taught. That's a truth that we have to hold and balance with another truth. Both are true at the same time, not one or the other. Admittedly, this is very difficult for our imagination to fully grasp, but the truth of the matter is that everything that is happening to us individually and collectively is a form of purification, not punishment. Without purification, there is no evolution. I've told this story before. The spiritual teacher, he was a psychiatrist, David Hawkins. And I believe him. I think he had a very high state of consciousness. And he said he remembers a past life where he was a Christian crusader fighting with a Muslim during the Holy Wars. It was a vicious battle, and they both killed each other. And when their spirits left their body, they looked at each other and they thanked each other. Because their purpose in that life, their evolution in that life, was to die for something bigger than themselves. That was their lesson. And they granted that to each other. Does that mean we should love war? No, I'm not saying that. Got to hold different truths together in a wonderful balance. Does that mean I think the Crusades were great? No, I'm not saying that. But you got to be able to hold different truths together in a balance. Note that does not mean that we ignore injustice. This is the other truth. But we dare to see it from a higher perspective. While the egoic mind perceives circumstances as black or white, all or nothing, all good or all bad, an enlightened soul understands that ultimately everything is working together to serve the good of all sentient beings. If we cannot finally surrender the world to God's loving providence, we will run the risk of being overcome by despair, fear, and burnout. Then we are no good for anyone, not even for ourselves. Prayerfully contemplate Yogananda's inspired words. God is love. His plan for creation is rooted only in love. Every saint who has penetrated to the core of reality testifies to a divine and universal plan that is beautiful and full of joy. Let me give you another example. Swami Kriyananda tells this story. He was a direct disciple of Yogananda. Yogananda put him in charge of the monks. When Yogananda died, he ascended leadership in SRF. And in 1962, they kicked him out. He did not want to go. He got on his knees and begged them not to kick him out. He said, I will wash dishes for the rest of my life. Please do not kick me out. They kicked him out. And he went through 2 years of a dark night of the soul. He had a relationship with Anandamayi Ma. And he wrote her a letter about what happened. She wrote back, be grateful because your guru has arranged this all. At the moment, he didn't accept that. Now, I was just spent a week in Ananda Village, and if he wasn't kicked out of SRF, and I'll be talking about this more next week, Ananda Village is this community that is living the future now. 200 people living in community, most of them married, living a very sattvic life. That wouldn't have happened if they didn't kick him out. Anandamayi Ma was exactly right. This is a gift and a grace from your guru. We don't always see it in the moment, but at some point we'll be up on the mountain and we'll see how it all came together and worked out perfectly. All of this begs the question, how do we proceed in the world as it is presently constituted? The foundational truth that must guide us is straightforward. Okay? This is the Dharma that we have to adopt, and eventually the whole world will adopt it, but they're not there yet. But we're paving the way. Everyone has been created in the image of God. This truth is the bedrock of Judaism, Christianity, and yogic philosophy. This means that every human being on planet Earth possesses an innate dignity. Every man, woman, and child is known by God, and it includes all the bad players too, okay? Is known by God, valued by God, and loved by God. This includes the greatest sinners. Still deeper is the reality of our interconnectedness. Your consciousness and my consciousness are a participation in the very consciousness of God. And this means that we are all connected. Every thought, word, and action is a ripple of energy that impacts the collective consciousness of the human race. Quantum physics tells us this is true. We all exist as energy, and we're all in a singular field of energy. We know we have a biosphere. We know we have an atmosphere. Well, there's another term that's called the noosphere, and nous means Greek. In Greek, it means mind. We also live in a mind sphere. And all of our thoughts create this collective noosphere. I'm going back to what I had you do at the very beginning before the service started. We think at least 60,000 thoughts a day. Every thought we think seeds the noosphere. And they're like radio waves that float around. And we don't create most of our thoughts. We channel the thoughts that are floating around. And we channel the thoughts according to what our intentions are. One of the men I met when I was in Ananda, Haridas is his name. And he and his wife they have a separate spot near the main spot, but it's separate physically. It's their hermitage, they call it seclusion, something. And he's older than me, and he was with Kriyananda since he was 18. He was telling me about all the fires they had and things burnt down, and they had to rebuild them. And he's like chuckling. It was like, it's okay. We just rebuild them. We just did it better the second time so they wouldn't burn down. But you see the thought? It wasn't, oh my God, you don't know how hard it was. We had these fires. We thought God abandoned us. They just built them better the second time. Okay? Every thought we think seeds the collective consciousness of the human race. And it influences everything at some subtle level. The only question remains is whether or not we are blessing or cursing the human family. The only question that remains is whether or not we are blessing or cursing the human family. Jesus draws out the implications of this truth when he says, whatever you do or say about my brothers or sisters, you do unto me. This non-dual vision of reality needs to be more than a theory. It must be internalized so that it becomes the lifeblood of our interactions with all people. And it must be the foundation of our nation's laws and policies. As Jesus said, man was not made to serve the law was made to serve man. A practical aspect of this non-dual vision is the ability to hold different truths in a creative, loving, and wise tension. For example, every nation has a right to secure its borders and to have wise immigration policies that serve the common good. Otherwise, chaos will reign. Whether we are talking about our individual life or our collective lives, healthy boundaries are always needed. I'm willing to bet most of you lock your doors at night. Okay? You should. At the same time, immigrants must be treated in a dignified, respectful, and humane manner, regardless of their legal status. In this spirit, can we not choose to differentiate those immigrants who work hard, obey our laws, and contribute to society from those who are outright criminals? Let us not forget that Jesus and his family spent time in Egypt as refugees fleeing from persecution in their homeland. Two truths at the same time are both true and needed and necessary. I'm not touting a conservative or liberal theology. God save us from such blinding nonsense. Rather, I'm making practical that precious yogic greeting, namaste, meaning the God in me bows before the God in you. Simply, the dignity of every person must be uppermost in our hearts and minds at all times, especially concerning the most vulnerable among us, the unborn, innocent children, the disabled, and the elderly. Therefore, we must choose to see fear, despair, and all forms of angry rhetoric as temptations to be avoided. We must not become part of the problem. Jesus' metaphor relative to salt's preservative properties might be helpful here. Salt that has lost its saltiness is good for nothing. Once we give in to fear and anger, we become salt that has lost its preservative powers. Likewise, when our response to evil is no longer rooted in a higher transcendental awareness, we forfeit our capacity to preserve the good. We must pray and meditate. We must maintain our sanity. We must be a force for healing and reconciliation. We must seek to embody God's light and truth in the world. Let me just say this quickly. I just wish we could do away with these categories of conservative and liberal. Okay? We're not going back to the old conservative days. They're dead. And we're not going back to the old liberal days. They're dead. Something new will eventually mature, but this is the problem in the meantime. When I say I'm a conservative and you say something liberal, my ears just shut down altogether, or vice versa. We have to learn to approach things with unprejudiced objectivity. The only lens I attempt to bring to things are what are the Ten Commandments, what are the yamas and niyamas, and what are the Beatitudes. That's the only lens I choose to look at reality from and judge from that lens, not conservative, Republican. We got to get away from that. We are children of God first, period, end of discussion. When we do choose to actively resist the forces of death, delusion, and degradation, we must do so non-violently, using soul force as the guiding energy behind our thoughts, words, and actions, all in the spirit of Gandhi and Dr. Martin Luther King. In other words, we must consistently seek to attune our thoughts, attitudes, and actions to the consciousness of our gurus. Otherwise, we work in vain. The ultimate goal of engaging the world is to welcome our wayward brothers and sisters back into the beloved community. Love has to be the motivation, even when we stridently, nonviolently seek to change the world. I would be remiss if I did not point out a subtle but powerful temptation we all face, namely, to see the virus of egoic delusion operating in others, but not in ourselves. Specifically, when we are not aware of our own shadows, we inevitably project them onto our so-called enemies. I frequently have conversations with people from every political and philosophical persuasion imaginable, and they are absolutely convinced of the rightness of their position, touting their relevant data, religious dogma, and political doctrine to bolster their beliefs. If we are going to have an honest conversation about the ills that plague our society and the principles that should guide our public life, then we all have to be willing to be offended, because at some level we all got it wrong. Okay? We all do. We don't know what we don't know. That's the problem. Because none of us see the whole picture. This is why Jesus tells us, why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your own eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite. First take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. And let me just say this, whenever we'll just say there's a war, okay? War is bad. We all agree with that. But what we see is the war that broke out right now. What we don't see is all the missteps along the way that both parties took to create the environment that created the war. That doesn't mean that whoever started the war is justified. That's not what I'm saying. We never look at all the little decisions that were made that created the catastrophe. And both sides generally have contributed along the way to the situation that led to the catastrophe. That's why we have to take our blinders off and look at ourselves as well as looking at other people. And we have to own our shadows. In closing, I want to say something about the mission of the Assisi Institute vis-a-vis the state of the world. First of all, we are a gathering of spiritual pilgrims, endeavoring to live from the flow of God's loving consciousness. This necessarily means that we will always be a bit uneasy with the world, and the world will most likely be uneasy with us. If we were comfortable operating in the world and on the world's terms, we'd have nothing to offer. Therefore, we endeavor to stand apart from fear and despair and vitriolic language so commonplace in today's culture. We will stand firm on the truths that our gurus teach, but always from a place of peace, joy, compassion, goodwill, and love. We will root ourselves in the great silence so that our thoughts, words, and actions might be inspired by heaven's highest wisdom. In the spirit of St. Francis of Assisi, we will seek to serve the materially and spiritually poor. Together, through our love of God and our compassion for the world, we will humbly aspire to bless the present generation and those who will come after us, always intent on sharing the liberating wisdom of Kriya Yoga and the universal teachings of our God-realized gurus. Let me tell you an experience I had, and then I'm going to truly close. I'm sorry I'm going so long, but this is important, okay? And listen, there's no place on earth that is perfect. Ananda is very good. It's not perfect, and I'm not trying to make us into a little Ananda. I want to make that clear. But the last day I left, Atul, who came last year with Isha, he was driving me back to San Francisco. And I said, Atul, it's really a good idea that you're driving. And he said, why? Because I said, right now, I'm in the astral world. I'm not exaggerating. I felt like heaven had descended, and I was living very directly for about 15 minutes in the astral world. I said I couldn't drive now if I wanted to drive. The way that Ananda lives their life, they open themselves up to the blessings of heaven. So do we. That's why we avoid vitriolic political discussions. If we got into that and started debating one another, this rarefied air that we have would block heaven from descending in our midst. We are endeavoring to live in such a way, even when we're facing conflict, we are endeavoring to live in such a way that we keep that air rarefied so heaven can descend. And I just want to close with this. It's very important, because I've said I'm going to end on a very hopeful note. A young man that I do spiritual direction with, he's about 40. This was about a year ago. We were in a session. He said, I'm pretty left of center. I said, yep. He said, I'm pretty critical of our country. And I said, yep. And he said, but I'm beginning to think our country can't be all bad. I said, it's not. And then it was like so sweet. It was like a little boy. He said, is it okay to also feel good about our country? I said, absolutely. Absolutely. Let me go back to the Declaration of Independence. And I want to connect this to Yogananda. See if I can just do it from memory. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and they have been given inalienable rights by our Creator of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now, I'm saying our country has not fully lived up to that. Okay, let's be clear about that. I'm not naive. However, we have partially lived up to it. Otherwise, if we opened our borders, many more people would come than would leave. Okay? The founders of our country, they weren't saints, but they were very spiritual men. And I'd be willing to bet they had a much deeper interpretation of liberty, life, and happiness. I think by happiness they meant what Yogananda meant, the bliss of God. By liberty, I think they meant what Yogananda said, that when we realize who we are in our soul, we are truly free to create truth, beauty, and goodness. And I think what they meant at the deepest level is about life was not just biological life, but a quality life, a God life. I'm going to make a statement. You can disagree with me. I think there's a number of reasons why Yogananda came to this country. I think one of them was the Declaration of Independence, the Bill of Rights. He saw the potential in the fact that we believe that God has given us the right to liberty, to life, and to happiness. And I'm willing to believe that he thought, that's the fertile ground that I can work in. And this message of self-realization can spread. We're not perfect. Don't misunderstand me. Last thing I'll say, quoting Yogananda, he said we were going to go through a period of crisis, and I think we're probably going through it. But you know what he said? It's a quote. At the end, America will be half as rich as when it began, but will be doubly more spiritual. Twice as spiritual is what he said. That's our destiny. And we at the Assisi Institute are doing our part to open ourselves up to the future and to bring it into the present and to pave the way for the future.